For the past 2 years we've been grinding late game and creating many guides along the way, and now it's time to compile it all into one video. These topics are the ones we will be covering in this video, and by the time we're done you will be ready to get some really high rounds in both easy mode and Chimps mode. A good start is to choose the map you want to play on. If your only goal is to make it as far as possible no matter the map, the easiest maps are Logs, Resort and Cubism. As for the track length, Logs is the clear winner. There is actually one map with a slightly longer track than Logs, which is Scrapyard, but as you can see there's almost no space for you to build your towers, which makes this map very bad despite the very long track. And speaking of buildable space, Resort might beat Logs by a little bit in that department, and on top of that, Resort also allows for the true Sun God to hit more targets at once than on Logs, as we found in our research long ago. But that doesn't quite make up for the lost amount of track length. Also, the Super Brittle debuff has a lot more uptime on Logs than on Resort, due to the fact that the most busy part of the track on Resort is not in the center of the map. This leaves a lot of the track without any coverage, so in short, Logs is the best option, but you will be able to make it very far on Resort and Cubism as well. Moving on to what hero you want to use. This will depend on what game mode you're going for, easy mode or Chimps mode. If you're playing something like Impoppable, it's basically the same thing as easy mode, so anytime you hear me say easy mode, I basically mean anything except Chimps mode. For Chimps mode, you really only have one option, and that's Sealy. You won't be able to use her totem since that sacrifices lives, but her Hex ability makes her the best Chimps hero by far. For easy mode, you can go with either Adora or Sealy. Many beginners seem to think that Geraldo is also a viable option due to his Paragon totems to bring all the Paragons up to degree 100, but this actually doesn't contribute a lot of damage at all compared to Adora or Sealy. The reason Adora is so amazing is due to her Blood Sacrifice ability that sacrifices a tower and gives twice the attack speed and plus 50% extra range to all Sun Avatars, Temples and Sun Gods in her range, with the 100% uptime given that she is level 20 and you sacrifice a tower worth at least $4,000. To do this in a game, you place one small tower that costs at least $4,000 after all the discounts from the temples in a corner somewhere that you can sacrifice and replace over and over during the rounds. On top of this strong ability, she is also a very strong hero in terms of her damage output. When she is fully buffed and using all of her abilities, she is up there among the max buffed tier 5 towers. The negative part about Adora is that you can't fully AFK the late game with her, since you need to manually sacrifice a tower in regular intervals to keep the buff active. If you go with Sealy, you can just techbot her and all of her abilities will be automated. So Sealy can be a nice choice for a more laid back game of free play, but she can also be used in a different way that is far from laid back. To fully utilize Sealy's Hex ability, once you reach rounds that are too hard for you to beat while AFK, you wanna sell and rebuy Sealy to level 20 in a range of a favorite trades or the Navark for the extra sellback value multiple times mid-round and spam her Hex ability. Doing this will be very click intensive and it will need vast amounts of money, requiring some crazy levels of farming during the long setup process. So if you're playing late game in easy mode, I would personally recommend going with Adora, or if you want a fully AFK game, just go with Sealy and use a tech bot on her. Now moving on to all the other towers you want to use. Starting with Chimps mode, since Ninja Kiwi patched the bug that allowed temples to make money in Chimps mode, the strat is no longer to build a lot of temples. Instead, the strategy involves getting a true Sun God, a support temple, and a lot of Bloon Jitsu and Shinobi ninjas, plus a ton of overclocks. Ninjas has long gone unnoticed, but recently they have been found to be amazing for late game and even bossing as well. Apart from those towers, you also want to get all of the debuffs. The Grand Sabo, the Cripple Moab, both of the Brittles which stacks with each other, and also Glue Storm. Glue Strike does not stack with the Glue Storm, so this one is skipped. You also want to get a Permabrew, a Chinook to move it around, an Energizer, a Grandmaster Ninja, Homeland Defense and a Call to Arms, Primary Expertise, and some more 204 villages to give some more attack speed and range to the ninjas and the TSG so it can buff more towers. To stall everything except bad balloons, you want to get a Master Bomber and a Superstorm. Once you have all of this, you basically leave a little bit of space for you to place any future towers that you might afford after a long time of surviving with this setup. Good ideas here are towers like Legend of the Night and Super Mines, or even a Boat Paragon if you somehow manage that. As for the temple and true Sun God sacrifices, it's going to be a lot different than in easy mode. In Chimps mode we're just looking for support. The first temple that is eventually made into the TSG will have 50k in support. The second temple should have 15k, just enough to get the 20% discount for the TSG. And then when creating the TSG you sacrifice 50k of support again, plus the temple, so you get 50k in magic. The next temple is made only to buff the range of the TSG. It will be given 7.5k in support and nothing else. Since the True Sun God has max support sacrifices for both the temple and the TSG creation, this third temple won't provide any additional buffs if you give it more than 7.5k in sacrifices. Now let's talk about towers for easy mode. As for sacrifices for the temples, it goes like this. For the VTSG you want 50k in everything except support when you create the temple, and then 50k in everything when you create the VTSG, also known as a 2221 VTSG. Then you want 2 temples with 50k in everything except military, also known as a 1011 temple or a support temple. The rest of the temples should have 50k in everything except support, 1110. The buff given by the VTSG or True Sun God is totally unaffected by the amount of support sacrifice when you first created the temple that you turned into the True Sun God. The 2 support temples will give the temple buff to everything on the map, while the VTSG or TSG will give the True Sun God buff to everything on the map. This way, everything will be max buffed, and all the other temples and the VTSG can get the sacrifices that maximizes their damage. Sometimes beginners can get confused when they test it in Sandbox and see that a 1011 temple and a 2122 VTSG gets the most amount of pops. This is the best type of temple if you only have one temple on the map, since the support buff does work on the Minisun avatars that it spawns from its magic sacrifice. But we will of course have a lot more than just one temple, hence the best sacrifices are the ones I described previously. In easy mode late game you can choose between going for a lot of temples and sun avatars for DPS, or going for a lot of ninjas just like in Chimps mode. Both of these options will give you an incredible amount of damage. If going with the temples route you want to choose Adora as your hero, and with the ninjas route you want to choose Azili. We also want to get all of the Paragons to degree 91, which is the highest solo degree without Paragon totems, or 92 for the Apex Plasma Master, since the Master Double Cross lets you get 1 degree higher. Just like in Chimps mode, we want all of the debuffs, except we don't need the Grand Sabo, since the Ninja Paragon acts as a permanent one. We also want to get some more strong tier 5 towers, but which tier 5 towers do you want to get? Well, that depends on how much space you have on the map that you're playing. In a previous guide created a long time ago, I tested all the tier 5 towers for both single and multi-target damage and created a list of all the best towers based on both scores. This was created quite a few updates ago, but it should be about the same. For most easy maps you're probably looking at getting the top 13. Keep in mind that the order is not 100% set in stone, but it's good enough to serve as a basis for you to make your own decisions. Also something to keep in mind is the footprint of the towers, their size. While the sniper at the bottom there might not be great in terms of damage, it's so small that you are bound to have some spot on the map where not much else can fit, in which case an elite defender might be the best option. You also want to get the elite sniper for its attack speed buff to the cripple Moab, whether you're playing on easy mode or Chimps mode. While it already has 100% uptime for the main target due to all the other attack speed buffs, the secondary targets hit by its shrapnel gets a shorter debuff duration, so any attack speed buff you can give to the cripple is very important. Now it's time we talk about tower placement, starting with the 2 support temples that we use in easy mode. They should be placed so that their combined range when fully buffed cover the whole map to buff everything. As for debuffs, the 520 cripple Moab should be placed in this corner right here to make maximum use of its shrapnel to debuff as many targets as possible. The 502 Super Brittle should be placed right here by placing him on top of a boat or nav arc, and as for the normal 402 Brittle, it should be placed just under the water, given that the rest of the water is going to be full with other stuff. You should also get a secondary normal Brittle to place right at the start of the track. As for the 052 Glue Storm, it should be placed inside the range of a primary expertise village, since it reduces the cooldown for primary towers. It should also be placed as far as possible away from the track to leave space for towers that actually deal damage. Temples should be created close to each other, but not so close that you can't fit anything in between, thus wasting the space. Instead, they should be placed such that you can just barely fit an overclock in between them. Whether you are playing on Chimps mode or easy mode, you want a ton of overclocks as they are super efficient. They increase your damage output by a lot for the tiny space that they take up. Due to this, you will want to have one overclock for every big damage dealing tower that you have. For the VTSG, Sentry Champion and Grandmaster Ninja, assuming he is buffed by Shinobis, you want to give them 2 overclocks each so that they all have 100% uptime from the buff, because these towers are so strong that it's definitely worth it. There is a way to fit a Boat Paragon, a Sub Paragon, an Energizer and a VTSG all in the center water on logs using a little trick. You begin by creating your Boat Paragon and the Submarine Paragon, and then you place your Sun Avatar on the frozen water. Then place all of your Temple Sacrifices in its range, and then the VTSG Sacrifices just outside its range. And then you place your Energizer Submarine but don't upgrade it yet, and then you get yourself a Chinook. You then door gunner the Energizer Submarine and move the Chinook as far away as possible, and then you tell the heli to put the submarine back down again, and then you buy the Temple and the VTSG upgrade very fast as the heli is moving the submarine. If done fast enough, you will be able to fit everything. If playing on easy mode, you can choose if you want to play with or without powers. The powers that are useful are Tech Boss, which can automate your abilities, Time Stop, which causes time to slow down but does not affect Paragon, so overall you get more damage out, Monkey Boost, that causes all monkeys to attack twice as fast for a few seconds, and the Energizing Totem that gives 25% extra attack speed to all towers in its range for 5 rounds, and then it needs to be recharged. You can also make use of the portable lakes if you need a place to put your water-based towers and paragons if you're playing on a map without any water. You can also create your temples on top of them to make use of the carrier flagship buff to all water-based towers. Now for some tips and tricks. Tech bots take up a very tiny amount of space, even less than a sniper monkey, but with a large amount of tech bots that you will need, it will add up. To save space, you want to place as many of your tech bots as possible around super monkeys before you turn them into temples. This will cause the tech bots to be inside of the temple's footprint as they won't get sacrificed. When connecting your tech bots to all of the towers with abilities, remember to time them right. You want to make sure that your call to arms activates right after your homeland defense is finished. If you activate it too early, it will override the homeland, causing you to lose out on a few seconds of the stronger version of the buff. Speaking of timing, if you're using Adora and her Blood Sacrifice, remember to use the Blood Sacrifice ability as the Long Arm of Light ability is also active. This ability, among other things, causes her to have a lot more range, so if you use the Blood Sacrifice as this ability is also active, you will be sure to buff every single temple on the map as her range gets enormous. On the topic of the Blood Sacrifice ability, when you are so far into your game that you need to use this ability in order to survive, you will be lagging a lot due to the large amount of projectiles, no matter how good your PC might be. See this video right here. This lag will almost always cause your mouse clicks on the screen to register twice, so if you click the Blood Sacrifice icon, you will also click another time, causing you to accidentally sacrifice the wrong tower instantly, which could completely ruin your run. To avoid this, you have two options. Either click and hold down the mouse button for a few seconds before releasing. This will make sure that no click ever registers twice. You might have to try this more than once though, as the extreme lag can also cause the click to not register at all. The second method is the better one, which is to use the hotkey that you have set for that ability space. Sadly, there are only 12 such hotkeys and many more abilities, meaning that if you're unlucky, that particular ability might land on a different ability number that doesn't have a hotkey. But in that situation, you can always use method number 1. This is probably something that will get a fix in the future by Ninja Kiwi, but it's probably not very high up on the priority list, so if you're watching this in the far future, this may no longer be a problem. As I mentioned in the video covering lag in BTD6, reducing the projectile size to 0% will not prevent any lag, except potentially on some mobile devices and laptops with integrated graphics instead of a graphics card. But even though it will probably not help you reduce any lag, it still makes the game a lot more enjoyable and easier when you can see how far the Bloons has gotten on the track and where the tower you want to sacrifice is. Now I want to tell you about save states. There's a file in your BTD6 Steam folder that contains all of your map saves and a lot more profile data. You can create copies of this file and save those copies elsewhere to be able to go back and paste any of those files back into the Steam folder to revert to a previous point. This is something that is used by top boss players when they go for top runs on the leaderboard. This can also be used for late game so that you can revert to a recent round in case you messed up badly by, say, mistiming your abilities or sacrificing the wrong tower and not noticing until the round ended or something like that. I have a separate video going into the details of save states, and you should definitely check that one out if you plan to use this yourself. In the description you will find a link to my tutorial playlist in which you will find that video along with all the other guides I've ever made. So now for some in-game tricks. First of all, we have the Chinook trick, where you can move a tower into a position right next to a super monkey, and then as the tower is being moved, you upgrade that super monkey into a temple, and now you have a tower that is inside the footprint of that temple, sort of like we did with the tech bots before. Next, in super late game runs, you want to get the ultra boost as early as possible because you want to ultra boost all your towers to 10 stacks, and that takes a long time. So to make sure you have time, you can stall rounds by using a 401 MAME Moab sniper. And now for some end game tricks. As you're about to lose your game, you will still have some aces in your sleeve to push a little further. The first one is to sell your call to arms and only have your homeland defense that you will sell and rebuy for 100% uptime. Now you will have 100% extra attack speed all the time instead of having 100% extra half the time and 50% extra the other half. We don't do this from the beginning of the game for the obvious reason that it's very micro intensive. This next one you only do at the very end. If you reach a round that you simply cannot beat, then play the round for as long as you can and then sell your VTSG mid-round so you can once again buy the Legend of the Night. If you manage to survive most of the round, then you can leak the last part of the round using the passive black hole ability. After this, your setup is ruined and you won't survive another round. You've reached the end. So this trick is really just to push one more round. That is, unless you choose to go a completely different route. If you chose to use ninjas instead of temple sense on avatars, instead of getting the VTSG, you can choose to just get the normal True Sun God from the beginning and the Legend of the Night, and then use a sniper to stall every round long enough that you can get a passive black hole ability almost every round. As a last note before we move on from this section, I want to quickly mention monkey knowledge for the newer players who may wonder what monkey knowledge they should get first and which ones are most important for late game. The most important ones of all are these ones on the screen right now, but there's many more that help out a little bit, so in short you should work to get every monkey knowledge in the game. Lastly, if you are more of a beginner, you may wonder what order you should build stuff. For easy mode it's pretty simple. In general, you start by getting a good farm going, and then you get the ultra boost as soon as you can to start ultra boosting towers. You then start by working on getting all of your paragons, saving the ninja and the engineer for last, as they will gain pops very quickly in the later rounds using the Grand Sabo ability and the XL trap. After that you create the VTSG and all of the temples and then place the rest of the towers. I've done several late game runs that are narrated in close detail if you want to check out any of them for more guidance. For Chimps mode, the build order is a lot harder and may change as players develop new strategies. In general, you want to start with a cheap ninja setup and get ultra boost ASAP and then stall rounds to use it as much as possible and get working on your first temple. Managing to get a true Sun God in Chimps mode is very hard to do and also RNG dependent, since rounds in the late game are random and thus the income from pops will be affected. Going for a true Sun God is something you need to do if you're going for the world record, but you can also beat several hundred rounds with just 2 normal temples instead if you're going for a personal best. For a more detailed guide on placement order in Chimps mode, please check out any pinned documents in the Chimps channel in my Discord server linked below. Every single time you play a long game of Freeplay, you learn something new or realize something that you could have improved upon, so if you're new to late game, don't worry about getting everything perfect the first time. You will get a lot better for every single run that you do. So that's about it. Please leave a like and a comment on the video, it really does help me out a lot, and I will see you all in the next one.